morning. Today we have a whole ensemble here to present to us. We have the staff of the UW Ob-Gyn Clinical Research Office. They are here to talk to us. They provide a wide array of research services, including protocol review, research coordination, regulatory support, budgetary oversight, data management, and much more, which they're going to share with us today. The CRO helps make it possible to conduct a wide variety of clinical research studies in both inpatient and clinic settings, and they're here to sort of share some of their knowledge and expertise with us today. So join me in welcoming them.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jenny Petter, and I'm the Clinical Research Administrator within the Clinical Research Office. And today, myself and some of the staff within the Clinical Research Office are here to talk a little bit about some of the lessons that have already been learned in research, and to let you know what resources and support are available to you for clinical research, basically so you know how we can help. So this Grand Rounds today is going to be a little different than what you're used to. We want it to be very interactive. We want you to interrupt. We want you to ask a lot of questions. So feel free at any time to interrupt. A lot of what we're going to go through are going to be scenarios of things that are going to happen, and then we're going to ask a lot of questions about how things maybe could have been done differently. So the learning objectives today are up here. So we basically want you to understand the whole life of a clinical research study, identify what's needed, obtain some knowledge and contact information so you know a little bit about us and exactly what we do. We want you to put our faces with kind of what we do for you and how we can help you. Learn the aspects of study startup, including the whole life of the regulatory life cycle, so things like the IRB, IND process, things like that. Get a better understanding of good clinical practices, especially how they relate to consenting patients, and identifying and troubleshooting some common scenarios and things that we've come across in our research office. We don't have any relevant financial disclosures to report. So to start with, this is our clinical operations team. So I introduced myself earlier as the Clinical Research Administrator. Dr. Kushner is the Vice Chair of Clinical Research, so he leads our team. And then you'll see below, so the people who are here with me today, Rosalina Villalon-Landeros is our Program Manager. Amy Godecker, who some of you may know, she was lucky enough to present twice at Grand Rounds. She was here a couple months ago. But she's our Reproductive Health Research Scientist. Sharon Lahoviak is our regulatory specialist. She is not with us today. We do have a clinical research finance coordinator who just accepted the position. His name is Larry Russell. He'll be starting February 4th. And then Robin Wasilewski is our research coordinator, along with Melissa Zernick. Haley Mathiasen, we just hired her as a new research coordinator. And then Maria Villalon-Landeros is our research intern. So the Clinical Research Office, for those of you who don't know, it's located very close to where we are right now. We're in the basement of this building, just around the corner, actually. So first what we're going to talk about is just basically the life of a clinical research study, and then we're going to weave some scenarios into this. So I'm going to focus a little bit on study startup and some of the resources that are available in startup, including the IRB application and approval process. And then we'll go on to talk about recruitment, enrollment, study maintenance, end of enrollment, and then data analysis. So we're going to start with a scenario about study startup. So we have PI Max who wants to start a clinical research study, and he's very excited to get going. So he decides to submit his IRB application on his own. The IRB responds to the application with many concerns. He has over 50 questions that they want answered. He's surprised, he's frustrated, he wants to get going. He has funding. He has 3 years to enroll patients, and basically time is ticking, so he needs to get going. He also has a limited amount of time to spend on research because he has a full clinical. So basically what should the PI do and what resources might be available to the PI. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say? Yes?
The clinical research office.
Nice, good. Exactly. Oh, I'm sorry, Heidi.
So ideally,
Yep, good. Okay, you were going to go through. Nice. Awesome. Everyone's been listening. Go ahead.
ideally he would fill out the research request form.
Perfect.
His division liaison in the research advisory committee would be able to help him like figure out where that form is and how to
Exactly.
get it. Because that's the way to get to the clinical research office so that we don't need to know your individual names and roles.
Awesome.
Although as we work with you, we will learn them, but that one form gets you
Right.
in the door and connected to the resource.
Yep, perfect. Awesome. Thank you. So like Heidi said, the very first step in study startup for any research project involving human subjects or QI in the department needs to go through the department research request form. And this whole system was developed by the department, and many of you are aware of this already, because of the study feasibility project that was basically brought on by the dean's office to ensure that studies that are being submitted to the IRB are actually feasible. So they put it back on the department to make that determination. So we have 2 links on the department intranet to the research request form, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. But what happens when you fill out that form is it comes to our office, and it actually comes directly to Sharon Blahoviak and myself. We take a look at those, make sure the study is feasible, and then we go ahead and fill out the study feasibility form for the IRB. We may have questions for you and things like that. And I'll actually show you where that is right now. So this is a screenshot from the department intranet. So it's the same web address as our internet, but just with no KNOW in front of it. And you'll see the research request form is on the very front page of the knowledge portal in 2 different spots. So that'll take you right to the link, and it's just a red cap survey. With that being said, if you don't want to fill it out, you can't fill it out this way, call us. I'm happy to sit down and do it for you. We can do it over the phone. We can meet. However you'd like to do it is fine. Mm-hmm, sure.
For the interns that are getting our projects started,
Mhm.
we're doing our resident research, form.
Sure.
Is this separate to that, or does that form?
So this would be separate, and then whoever the faculty member is that you're working with, you'd also put that person's name on it. So you still would go through this process. And it's very short, it's like 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. A lot of the fields are optional. We want you to fill it out early, so we can kind of work with you too on, design and things like that if needed, so. And then, so.
Are you going to send a link after if you want to?
We can resend the link, sure, absolutely, yep. We can also send the direct link, so we can send the link to the intranet, and then there is a direct link to the survey. We can send both, so.
Send a direct link in an email where the subject is link to research request form.
Okay, sounds good. So then you can look it up, you can search, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So based on that form, we assess for studies feasibility, like I said, and I kind of put the names of the people who do these things. Typically it's myself, Sharon, and then I would talk to like coordinators, or I might talk to Amy, or depending on what's needed. Andrea Zorbas is in our research administration office, so she handles grants, pre and post award. So a lot of times we talk to her also just to make sure, like, okay, what does the budget look like for this funding, for the grant, and things like that, just to make sure everybody's in the loop, basically.
I think for the interns, as you guys know, we're reviewing your letters of intent next week with the REC. I wouldn't stress about filling this out yet, because you don't want them worried about your feasibility, because we're also worried about your feasibility.
Sure.
So we'll let you know, when you've been approved by everyone, and then you can kind of submit, and then you have their stuff. If you submit early and you're getting too much feedback from all sides.
That's a good, that's good feedback, thank you. Sounds good. So other parts of study startup, in terms of resources or support that's available to you is Amy's happy to help with study design assistance. So if you want someone to take a look at things, she's happy to help. She's able to give a lot of input. Our new clinical research accountant can help with budget negotiations and determining study costs. I mean, right now that's still happening. I'm helping with it right now, but the accountant, that'll be his, one of his primary roles when he's in place. And then we also develop case report forms. We help set up data management systems like Encore and RedCap or whatever may be needed for your study. So we already talked about this. The other part that I want to talk about is just the regulatory process. A lot of you are aware of this already because it's like the #1 thing that has to be done. So Sharon Blahoviak is our regulatory specialist in the office. She handles all regulatory applications for all divisions except for gynec. So the interesting thing about this department, and this is the 3rd department within UW, within SMPH that I've worked for, and how this department is special is that we are lucky enough to have 2 IRBs to work with and navigate. So Sharon can help determine if your application should go through the UW IRB or the Meriter IRB, and if one needs to see review and kind of work through the ins and outs of that. It does complicate things a little bit, but Sharon has been working on IRB applications for both for like I think close to 15 years. So Claire is the contact person for gynec though, if you're in the gynec division, and she can help you navigate. They have a whole regulatory office that can help. If you are looking into a trial that involves a new drug or a new device, you will need to go through the IND or IDE application process with the FDA, and our office is able to assist with that also. So this is sometimes a common misunderstanding with this is that there may be a drug that's already used for certain purposes, so people assume that it can be used for a new purpose. Well, that's not the case. So if there's a drug that's already approved by the FDA for certain purposes or reasons, it can only be used for those purposes. So if it's being used or proposed for a new purpose, you would need to go through the IND process for that. Okay, so I am going to pass it on now. We're going to move on to subject recruitment and enrollment, and we'll go through a new scenario with you.
Thank you, Jenny. Good morning, I'm Melissa. I want to talk to you a little bit about a scenario that involves patient recruitment. Let's say there's a patient X, in labor and delivery. That person meets the eligibility criteria for the study Check My Pulse. The study team member responsible for obtaining informed consent has back-to-back meetings today, wants to enroll the patient. Recruitment and funding ends in a month, and there are still many subjects to recruit. So there's some time pressure here. The study team member has a great relationship with the nurses. They are well aware of the study, and the study team member leaves a consent form with the nurse for the patient to sign. At the end of the day, the study team member returns to collect the consent form and signs it. What's going on in this scenario? What do you think? Thoughts? It doesn't seem right. Why does it not seem right?
They can't hand off their consenting
Okay.
responsibility.
Okay, it can't just be handed off. It can't be handed off to anyone, or could it be handed off to some people?
I would imagine, I mean, if there are other people who are like on the, I'm assuming they receive some sort of training for a specific study on what it takes to consent people, so anybody with that, like.
Those are good thoughts, yes. Those things are important. In particular, the person who does the actual consenting needs to be, 1, on the IRB, and 2, they need to receive some training. Sharon keeps a training log that is signed by the people who are eligible. So while that nurse may have a lot of knowledge of the study, she or he may or not be appropriate for doing the task of consenting. Anything else that anybody wants to comment on? Okay, we're going to be going to another slide that's going to talk about some specifics. But how about just the timing of it? Is it ever okay to just leave a consent form and have the person sign it later? I'm seeing heads shaking. No, it's not. So that leads us to the next slide. Something that we touched on was that approved study personnel who have been trained on the protocol, thank you for that input from the group here, and that person who's been trained and is on the protocol reviews the consent form with the potential subject. It's not okay to just leave it for the subject. We have to review it with the subject. And that consent form would be written and explained at the 8th grade reading level. So we need to make sure that comprehension is there. We need to give them time to review the form. If they want a minute of silence to review the form, if they want you to step out of the room, something like that, but they need to actually review the form, not just give them a pen and say, please sign this if you want to do this. We need to give them an opportunity for questions, and not just open-ended questions. We don't want to say, do you understand this? We want to say, do you have, are there questions or concerns that I can answer? Tell me what your thoughts are. Another one that's specific to our organization is the patient must first be approached by clinical staff. I can't just breeze into a patient's room and talk to them about clinical research. I need a nurse, a doctor, someone to approach and to tell me that, yes, this person is given permission. Consent form must be filled out completely and accurately, all blanks filled in, dates must be correct. If there's a mistake, it needs to be correctly lined out, initialed and dated. Both the subject and the person obtaining the consent form must sign on the same date and time, so in our scenario we didn't see that. The patient must receive a copy of the signed consent form, and the CRO must have the original signed form. So unless there are any other questions, I am going to ask, oh, you have a question, sorry, yes.
Thanks for this presentation. I have a question about the best way to approach resident studies that may be done on labor and delivery because they are working different shifts. So would it behoove us to add additional residents to our IRP so that they can help with the consenting of their co-residents' studies?
So I think that's a PI decision, whether they want to add residents to the protocol, and that's a decision that hopefully you'll be making in concert with us when you're designing the study. Work closely with us and talk about some of the additional hoops that we may need to jump through with residents who may have less knowledge or expertise than you do.
So I just want to interject quickly.
To keep in mind that, many of our patients are not available during the time, so which our coordinators are available.
Sure, definitely.
Processes to
You can add residents to a protocol as long as their clinical practices and HIPAA training is done. The city training is a big one that takes a while. So as long as residents or faculty or whoever you would like added to the protocol, that's completely acceptable as long as the training is done. So that's not a problem. We already have some faculty who decided to do that for some of their projects, so we can definitely do that at any time.
Yeah, so that's been a really successful practice in the history of resident projects in this institution to do that because of that exact issue. And at some places, especially with labor and delivery type trials, that is just the common way they're all done, is that every resident is on all labor and delivery trials so that we have that ability. So that's good. And I had one question for you, just for clarification. The term good clinical practice, because nowadays as physicians, we have like 7,000 acronyms, and a lot of them don't really mean anything. Someone just made it up and whatever. Here you have this one, good clinical practice. Sounds a little vague, but it's not. It's like a real thing, and there's actual ramifications for not doing it. It's not something that like we made up or you made up. Can you just address that a little bit, like where that comes from and why it's important?
I would certainly be happy to try. Yes, good clinical practice is a part of what we're tasked with. We have a responsibility an ethical responsibility. These are practices that we need to follow. There can be consequences in terms of, we'll get to that in a later slide, about how a study can be suspended, the study can be stopped if it is determined that these guidelines aren't followed. So yes, Dr. Krishner, thank you for underscoring the importance of doing things in the correct way. Yes?
to the point of me, but before, where I was before here, the residents were on every single thing, and we would just have meetings with the residents, with the coordinators who presented the study, went over how to do informed consent, signed all the appropriate paperwork, and all the labor and delivery stuff. They were on everything we did about lawsuits, urgent topic, it was just fun.
Perhaps we could do that here if we're going to facilitate more research.
Great.
All right. If there are no more questions, I think I will pass to Rob. To Rob. All right.
I'm Robin. I'm one of the research clinical coordinators. So I'm going to be the coordinator, and Jenny's going to be my patient. Hi, Jenny.
Hi.
My name is Robin. It's a consent form.
Thank you.
I'm not going to read the consent form to you, but I'm going to point out what I feel is important, and you can just follow along if you like. You'll also be able to take that home with you tonight. Hopefully you'll sign it before you go, but we'll see if you think about the process. The study is for hypertension, which obviously you have a diagnosis of. It involves 2 different doses of hypertension medication that is not approved by the FDA. You could receive this drug or you could receive a placebo. Oh, you can't hear me? Oh, sorry. You will be required to return to the clinic for 7 visits over a 12-month, and your first visit will be a screening visit. And at this visit, you'll have a physical examination. At your next visit, you will receive the study drug. Half of the participants in the study will receive the studied hypertension drug, HAPI-RX, and the other half will receive a placebo. You will have a 50-50 chance of receiving the drug or the placebo. Do you understand everything so far I've talked about?
So what else will I be doing though?
Well, there will be 7 visits total over a 12-month period of time, and there will be about 60 minutes long. During that time, we will take blood pressures and things like that. And everything is spelled out entirely in your consent form that you're looking at. As with any drug, there may be some side effects, and those are also listed in your consent form to review at a later time. These side effects are listed, and some medications also you're not going to be allowed to take while you're participating in this research study, because there could be cautions for taking certain drugs at the same time. So those drugs will be listed there, and also the physician will discuss with you what you can.
Talk about the risks with me, or?
Yes, if you want me to, but actually I thought I'd do it at a later time. I'm a little pressed for time today. We're short-staffed. So I'm going to have to leave a little sooner than I thought I was going to have to. I thought I had more time. Oh, and I also want to tell you, you're going to get paid for being in the study. And so you're going to get paid $50 for every visit that you complete. Do you think you're ready to sign the consent?
I don't really feel like I understand it very well. Like, I think I need some time.
Really? Well, I can give you some time, but maybe you could sign it and take it home, and then if you change your mind, you can just call me up, and then I'll just tear it up and throw it away.
Well, I think I'll take it home without signing it, and then I'll call you.
Okay.
All right. Does anybody have any thoughts about what went wrong with that scenario? Right. Did not discuss risk. Anything else? Did anybody notice that when she introduced herself and she asked, "Oh, you must be Jenny," is that a proper way of identifying your subject, or you guys know your patients? Right? There are multiple Jennys around. She may be Jenny, but is she the correct Jenny? Right? She failed to explain what was a placebo. I believe she skipped multiple steps in the consent form. You have the consent form, sorry.
I don't have it.
So she did not explain what was the difference between the drugs that she would be taking, what are the risks that she would be experiencing if she goes through the trial, benefits that she may have, what are the alternatives that she has of not participating in this study. So even though we don't have to go through every single section or word by word in these consent forms, we do have to touch on every single one of them because it is important, especially the risks and benefits of any study. So everything that it talks about here, another thing that is missing in this consent form is the HIPAA authorization form, which it does not include. So there are multiple things that went wrong in that consent. So that was the point, so that you could see something that was really, really done wrong, so you could identify that. However, sometimes there are more subtle things that could go wrong with the consenting that still you should be paying more attention about how you explain the consent form to the potential subjects so they are well informed about the study.
Well, I just want to say that it all starts with the consent. So if you don't consent properly, you may lose that patient during the course of the study. And also, when you get monitored or if you were to be audited for some reason, if things aren't done correctly, you could actually enroll a patient, have her complete the study, and then not be allowed to use her data. So it's very important to get it right from the very start. And educating the patient is the start of it.
Yes.
The issue came up with that about leaving the consent form, like signing it and not sending it in terms of like the patient wants a little bit more time, which is so common because these are so complicated, these consent forms. Like, what's the right way to do that? If the patient's like, I'm pretty sure I want to do this, I'm 90% sure, but I just am not quite ready. What's the right way to do that?
The right way is they should be allowed to take it home if they want to. They should actually be able to take it home, review it with family members or friends or whoever, and then bring it back in on another date. So if they're not ready, I mean, even when you're signing someone before they're going to have a C-section or something, you go and you talk to them and you say, I can leave the room. Obviously, they don't have as much time. They can't take the consent home. But you can give them a moment alone so that they can process it without you looking over their shoulder.
And then ultimately, if the participation in the study does depend on something like a sample that needs to be collected during a C-section, and they're undecided, well then if they're still undecided and it's time for the C-section, they can't participate, which is fine. I mean, research is voluntary, and I think that's what we stress too. So we always err on the side of giving them as much time as they need, even if it means then they ultimately can't participate. So.
Thank you.
So Robin talked about doing things correctly from the start. So I'm going to give you another scenario, and we can talk a little bit about what happens when we wind up enrolling an ineligible subject. So a coordinator meets with a prospective research subject who's interested in enrolling in a research study. Medical records have been reviewed, and there's no question that the subject is eligible. So a consenting appointment is made. It's made for 2 weeks after that original eligibility has been determined. The consent occurs. While the coordinator is entering information into the data management system, this is after the consent has occurred, she notices a recent diagnosis in the medical record, congestive heart failure, and that makes the patient ineligible. But as we know, she's been consented. What do you think should happen in that scenario? Is it okay? No, I see head shaking, no. So, and it's not okay because there is a diagnosis which makes that patient ineligible. So, what should happen going forward is the question. So, we've determined that the patient has been enrolled incorrectly. If the coordinator is the person who has picked up on that, the coordinator is talking with the regulatory specialist and going through the procedures involved in unenrolling that subject. The other thought is what might help us avoid doing something like this in the future. Any thoughts on that? Reviewing the consent form, is that what you said? The medical record, yes. So the medical record has been reviewed, but do medical records change over time? Even within the span of a couple of weeks, somebody's status could change in a number of different ways. It's not uncommon for a birthday to occur, and now they're not even the same age as they were when the form was reviewed initially. So there are a number of different reasons, and it's important to readdress that eligibility at the moment of consent to make absolutely sure to double and triple check and make sure that the eligibility is what we think it is. Does anybody have anything else to ask about or add? Okay, thank you.
All right, so we're moving on to scenario number 4. Can you guys hear me? In the back, maybe? Yeah. Okay. So in this scenario, there is a research kit A which has to be collected from all subjects in study X. This kit contains 2 tubes for blood. However, the study team member accidentally grabs research kit B, which contains 3 tubes of blood instead of 2. Hands it over to the phlebotomist draws the blood, and then hands it over to the coordinator or the study team member who is responsible for conducting the study visit. Is there a problem with collecting an additional tube of blood? Anybody has any ideas? Remember, the study says that research kit A should be obtained for this particular study, and it only contains 2 tubes of blood. That may be 10 milliliters of blood, so maybe there were 30 milliliters of blood that were collected. So,
Big picture, I don't think it's an issue in terms of like clinical stability, but I think obviously you consented them to 2 tubes of blood, so they should be informed that you took 3 tubes extra.
and it's absolutely right. So this would be a deviation of protocol. So the definition of deviation of protocol is an accidental or unintentional change in non-compliance with the protocol. This change does not increase the risk or decrease the benefit for the patient or the research subject. It does not have a significant effect on the subject's rights, welfare, or safety. Does not have a significant effect in the integrity of the data. Deviation of protocols could happen from many aspects. It could be from subject, the researcher, or any other staff that is participating in conducting the study research. For example, this would be in the case scenario, it's an example of the deviation of protocol. A missed study visit that was rescheduled as another deviation of protocol. Failure to report or conduct self-assessment questionnaires or anything else that has not been described in the protocol, that is described in the protocol but does not get done that way, it has to be reported or has to be noted as a protocol deviation. So how do we deal with protocol deviations? We have a handy protocol deviation tracking log. And so the coordinator or the study team member responsible for conducting the research will fill this one out. So it tells you information about the event that happened, assessment of safety and data integrity, and the PI must always sign this log. This is for the case that we have coordinators conducting the study visits, and the PI is not always there to see every single patient. So this is so that the PI is always aware that there is a change or that there was an event that could potentially be reported to the IRB. The next, the steps in dealing with this reportable or protocol deviations is always to talk to the IRB. The IRB will help you determine whether this is something that needs to be written in a report or send it over to the IRB. This is usually written by the designated personnel, usually the coordinator. If you're conducting your own research, we can always help you write these reports and submit them to the IRB. We always follow whatever recommendations the IRB has. So in this case scenario, it is difficult to tell what the IRB will say, but they will most likely tell us that we have to get rid of that extra tube of blood that we drew. We have to tell the patient or the subject that we drew an additional blood that we were not approved to do so, and tell them of any risks that may be associated with that blood draw. One thing to note, if there are many protocol deviations that they are starting to become a pattern, there is a risk of the research being temporarily suspended until all personnel is properly trained, or it may be permanently suspended due to safety for the patient or safety to the research participants. So, any questions? Great.
So we're going to talk a little bit about adverse events. We're going to start with a scenario. Patient Y enrolled in study X, had a blood draw for the study. 2 days later, not close enough. 2 days later, patient presents for another study visit. The coordinator notices that there's a small rash at the side of the needle stick. The patient does not complain about the rash. So is this considered an adverse event? The answer is yes. Anything that occurs during the course of a research study, whether it's related or not related, and actually the only one that can determine whether it's related or not is either the PI of the study or whoever has been delegated that authority to state whether that's an adverse event or not. So the rash was not there. It was not in our medical history. So you do have to write it down as an adverse event. Along with this, even though it seems very small, the information has to be documented thoroughly for the PI or whoever is going to assess the adverse event so that they can decide whether it is related to the drug or if something needs to be done. They sign off on this information, and then this AE is given to, in our case, to Sharon and the research for the IRB, and she will determine whether it's a reportable event. If it's not a reportable event, or if it is, everything goes on a log. I think the log is next. Goes on a log, and that's how we track AEs through the course of the study. And this is very important because it tells, when they're doing analysis, it shows whether things are reoccurring or what's going on that might be related to the study, even though at different sites it may have only occurred once, but maybe it occurred once at every site that was conducting the research study. So, and then if it's not immediately reportable, which the rash probably would not be, then it could be just reported at the continuing review. So here are the definitions of adverse events. There's one by the FDA, and there's also one through GCP. They are pretty much the same, but an adverse event is any untoward medical occurrence associated with the use of a drug in humans, whether not considered drug-related. A serious adverse event is an event that is an AE that results in any of the following outcomes, such as death, life-threatening, inpatient hospitalization or prolongation of existing hospitalization, persistent or significant disability or incapacity, congenital abnormality or birth defects, or anything that involves any of the above. So even a patient that comes in, let's say a pregnant patient comes into the hospital for severe headache, maybe some light spotting, and she gets admitted, they assess her, they do lab work, she's not preeclamptic, her blood pressures are high but not really out of range, but they decide to monitor her overnight. to make sure that it's not going to turn into something worse. And so she ends up staying overnight in the hospital. So even though, and then she's discharged the next day, even though nothing really came of it, it is a serious adverse event because she was hospitalized. And unfortunately, there are things that you have to write up even though they really aren't related to the study, but because of the regulations, we have to follow those regulations.
If someone's just submitted for observation like 23 hours, is that a difference or not? This does deviation, which
If it's inpatient, yes.
the observation still be
It
considered.
still becomes a
Okay, so that
study.
means hospital.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Unfortunately, yes. Oh, yes.
I really appreciate you going through this way, because it makes a lot of sense as you work through it in these different levels. I just want to bring up to the PIs and the room residents and such that this is oftentimes a lot of the work once the study is going that you're going to be doing, and it seems quite annoying. And I just want to be clear, this is the reality of doing research. And so a lot of the times that the research team is going to be coming up and talking to you, it'll be for these sorts of issues. And it'll just be like, look, I'm busy. It's not, look, the patient was on a study that you gave them like a Tylenol every week. And that's all you're doing is giving them Tylenol every week. And they had a car accident. The car accident's totally unrelated to Tylenol. It was like 6 days after the Tylenol. Now they're in the hospital for 2 weeks getting orthopedic procedures. Every single day, there's going to be a list of adverse events that have to be run by the PI and signed off on and determine the degree and determine whether they're possibly related. And you may know in advance that they're not and you may be busy, but it doesn't matter. This is all stuff that has to be done. And it's a ton of work on them, and it's also a ton of work on you, and you have to respect that and know that. And so this is a part that I think that when I started doing research, I had no idea that this was going to be such a major part of it, and it really is. So the more, I appreciate you going through it like this, and just from a PI standpoint though, this is not a subtlety, this is like the reality of doing research.
Thank you.
So we're running short on time, but I do want to give Amy a couple minutes quickly to finish up on the data analysis. We can kind of go through the full life cycle.
So I will go through this quickly since I've done, that's okay, done it some of you before. So let's say the PI's been working on a study for a year or so, approval's done, they've been recruiting for a year, they're ready to start analysis, they've got a deadline in a couple weeks for a conference they want to go to, their schedule's really full though, and their stat skills are rusty. They were always focused on collecting the data and thought, I have time later to find a statistician, but now they're in a time crunch. What can they do? So the first thing is start early. Involve your statistician from the very beginning of the process. They can help you design the study and what data are collected and how, and that can streamline things down the road. And then they're aware as the study is going on of the timeline and what's coming up. In our research intake form, one of the questions is, do you need biostatistical support? If you have a statistician, great, put them down. If you don't, they're likely to contact me, and I can help you find somebody. Or if it's a smaller project, I can maybe do it myself. But again, involve them early, and if you're submitting a grant application, the statistician should be named, or at least set aside money for the statistician for that. And the pre-award team in our office, in Andrea's office, will also probably contact me to make sure that the resources that you're budgeting are sufficient. So that there are multiple pathways for you to get help aside from me. They all go through the Department of Biostatistics, and there's a common form that you can fill out if you, it's through ICTR or through the Carbone Cancer Center for Gyn-Onc. But it all goes to the same portal and the same triage within the biostats department. If you need help finding the form or filling it out, I'm happy to help you. And I'm kind of been the department liaison to work with biostats to make sure that there are no
glitches in the system, that everything's going smoothly, and that you're getting what you need. So they need at least 3 weeks before any deadline, 4 weeks if it's a grant application. We have to make sure that if you've got a UW statistician, but you've got your merit or IRB, that you've also done what you need to do with UW and that they're named on the appropriate forms and everything. But don't give data to the biostatistician before you've got your IRB approval or exemption in hand. Data need to be really ready for analysis, not just collected, but there's a lot of kind of data cleaning that needs to go on and dealing with missing data and stuff like that needs to happen before the statistician wants to see it. I can also help you with that process and determine whether it's ready to go for the analyst. And then there's also a general expectation that the biostatistician will be a co-author. There's a lot that can there's a lot that can go into that. It's not a one-time conversation. A lot of times there might be change in personnel or whatever. It's best to have those discussions very early, like the first consultation with your biostatistician, and document that we're working on developing a form, but it's not quite ready to roll out yet. But it might be an ongoing conversation as the project is handed off and multiple people end up working on it. Ideally, we only want one statistician working on it, but things come up and things change. So it's ongoing, but the main thing you need to know is if you have any questions, I can help you work on it. So in summary, we can help you in our office throughout the life of the study. From the very beginning planning, we involve people early within our department and externally as well, and it starts with that research request form. There are also lots of regulations and guidelines to follow for IRB, the budget, recruitment, consenting, deviations, adverse events, and analysis. And a lot of these, as Dr. Kushner alluded to, we didn't make up. They're federal guidelines that we have to follow, and there are serious consequences for not following them. And we can help you get it right the first time and avoid mistakes or delays. Questions?
Does anyone have any questions? Is that it? Is that the last slide? Yeah, that was it. Okay. Yep. Any questions for anyone we can answer quick? I know we went over on time. We're happy to help, and we're just around the corner, so come and see us anytime. You can stop by, you can email us. That's what we're here for, so please take advantage of the resources and support that you have available. Okay, thank you.